them separate. Now if you see here, this orange diagram here, this was the parent species, okay? So this is, let's say it was one parent species, and some kind of geologic or geographic separation has occurred. This is a geographic barrier because a mountain just came up. So now this species has split into two, and one group is on this area, one group is on this area. Now depending upon the time that has passed between the two species when they can come together again, let's say it was only temporary for a few years, and somehow these members of the two groups can again come together, they have still retained the ability to interbreed. That means they have not become two different species. However, if the time that passes between the two groups is a long time, too many mutations have accumulated, and nature has given a thumbs up or a thumbs down to too many mutations, then these two groups become so different. It's kind of like, try to imagine you are very good friends with one of your classmates, or from kindergarten, and then you go on a short holiday. You were only away for 10 days. You come back, nothing changes between you and your friend. You were just away for 10 days. However, one of you, your parents moved, so you've moved away for 10 years. Then you come back. Are you still do you still as close to that friend from elementary school now after coming back 10 years? It's like too much time has passed. I don't even know this person, who this person has become, right? It's exactly the same logic. So depends upon how much time has passed will dictate if this will become two different species or not. Now we move to sympatric. Sympatric is a new species arises within the same geographical area. There was no geographical separation, and one of the examples they have given here is polyploidy that happens in plants, where species may originate from an accident. Okay, it's a chromosomal duplication accident that results in an extra set of chromosomes, or it could be habitat complexity. For example, sockeye salmon. Okay, so salmon, this was like one species, and then one group of these salmon species, they, instead of going to marine waters, instead of going to the sea, they started going to a lake, and they were like, oh, I like this. So few of the salmon fish went there and they laid their eggs in the lake. The rest of the fish, they just went to the sea and started laying their eggs there. So when the new fish hatched, a group of fish hatched in marine water, and the other group of fish was hatching in the fresh water. Over the years, as some members of the salmon group kept going to the lake, the other kept going to the sea, their habits changed, their environmental factors changed. So mutations, as they happened, nature gave a different kind of thumbs up to this group A versus a different kind of thumbs up to this group B, because they were doing their reproductive part of their life in a lake, while this group was doing the reproductive part of their life in salt water, in sea. So that is an example from fish. Or a particular kind of fly, I forgot the name. So this particular kind of fly was feeding on a fruit X, okay, and was laying eggs there on that fruit. Then suddenly an apple was introduced into that environment. So some of the flies found an alternative food. They were like, apple, let me try this. So they tried it and they liked it, while some others, they didn't want to deviate from their original fruit, so they kept feeding on that fruit and laying eggs there, while this fly kept coming to the new fruit, apple, and started laying eggs there. Again, their reproductive habits are changing. When the reproductive habits and preferences change, as mutations occur, nature will select different mutations here and different mutations here. Right? The mutations are not different. Mutations are random here, mutations are random here. Nature selecting the mutations are different. So as nature selected different mutations on the flies feeding on fruit X compared to the flies feeding on fruit Y, which is apple, then these became, over the period of time, they became different species. Now let's understand polyploidy or so a failure of cell division sometimes doubles the chromosome number from original diploid to a tetraploid. Okay, a second form of polyploidy is when two different species interbreed and produce hybrid offspring. So how does polyploidy occur? Let's say this is one species, this is another species. This species is 2n equals 4. What is human being? 2n equals? What's our chromosome number?
46.
2n equals 46, right? So if it was human beings, it would be 2n equals 46, but it's a different, like, imaginary species. 2n equals 4, this is 2n equals 6. Please keep in mind that all the times, when we're talking about sexually reproducing organisms, our chromosome numbers are diploid. Diploid means in even numbers, because our chromosomes exist in pairs, right? So you see 4, 6, 46. In mice, it would be 40, so it's always an even number. Now, during gamete formation, in sexually reproducing diploid organism, during gamete formation, what happens is the chromosome number will be halved, right? So, here, because it's 4, the gamete is 2, the sperm, let's say. And for here, the ovum is half of this is 3. Now, if this was reproducing with its own sperm, this 3 plus 3 will go back to 6, and the 2 plus 2 would go back to 4. So that's what is happening in nature all the time, right? The gamete gets halved, and however, by chance, this species mates with this species. So let's say this sperm is going and fertilizing this ovum, right? So now 3 has joined 2. What's the number? 5. When it's n equals 5, this is sterile, and that's why mules cannot reproduce. Their chromosome number makes them sterile, right? So this is a sterile hybrid. Now these sterile hybrids for plants, they can reproduce asexually. There's an asexual reproduction. However, so if this sterile was formed, nature is kind of ensuring that this hybrid is sterile, right? So this is a hybrid that is sterile. That is what commonly occurs in nature. However, by chance, during DNA replication, during cell division, the chromosome number gets doubled. Cell division error. So when the cell division error happened, all the chromosomes, let's say, doubled. What's the chromosome number now? 5 times 2 is 10. So now this particular zygote with chromosome number 10 is not sterile, because it's even number. But however, is it the same as this or this? It's different. It's a new species that has formed by accident, by chance, because of course, first of all, there was an interspecies mating, and then a cell division error. Yes?
So theoretically, if we were to be able to control in the lab, let's say mules, for example, and make them sterile, would they become a new species, or would they not?
We could, if allowed, if research is allowed, if a fund is provided, they could do some changes to mule. It would be a different species. It won't be called a mule because the chromosome number would be changed. But we can create. There have been in some zoos, probably you have seen liger and tigon, but they're all sterile, right? So when it's a male tiger and a female lion, then it's called a liger, and then if it's the opposite, then it's called a tigon. But all of these attempts so far have created steriles, because it's so difficult to create an animal or to create an interspecies mixing. First of all, to get a member of one species to interbreed with another, to mate with another, it's not easy.
Would it even be considered a new species because we changed it, or would it be like given a new title because it's not?
For the mule case or the tiger and the liger case?
Right, in other words, it's not completely organically a new species.
Yes, yeah.
So
it is not biologically a different species, because they do not have the ability to reproduce and create fertile offspring.
Makes sense.
Are all dog hybrids? So there's like ones with wolves, and then there's coyotes.
So that is their, not hybrids, that is their evolutionary ancestors.
Is
right?
there a similar example to that with another species?
Most of the, if you look at evolution, all the animals or plant species, they all evolved from a common ancestor. And if you look at evolution, it's like a tree, right? So earliest, it all started like with something like bacteria. We all started something like that. Slowly prokaryotic, then it became eukaryotic. From eukaryotic, the lowest forms, the earliest fish, the amphibians were the ones that slowly moved land, reptiles, birds, mammals. So we do share a common ancestor. So everything has a common ancestor with something else. Yeah.
So another example.
Those are not hybrids. Those are evolutionary descendants.
Are there other examples of species that reproduce that are with their own evolutionary descendants?
Now you have to keep in mind, if an evolutionary descendant has formed, then the evolutionary ancestor is no longer available. Because A descendant means A has changed to B. So the A, when A has changed to B, A is no longer living.
Mm-hmm.
So our evolutionary ancestor is no longer present. So an evolutionary ancestor cannot have a hybrid with an evolutionary descendant. Yes, we could have from A, it became B and it became C, and you're asking if B and C could form a hybrid, because once A has formed B and C, A is no longer there, right? So there are very, very rare examples, particularly especially in plants, of interspecific hybrids that have formed naturally, spontaneously, and that are fertile, that have formed a new species, mostly in plants.
Okay.
And you've seen some examples in case of animals where the reduced viability, that salamander has the ability to reproduce, however it's so weak that it's going to die.
The example of dogs with wolves or coyotes, do you know, are they sterile or fertile?
With dogs, I don't think they have tried to mate a dog with a wolf because they are different species. So there was an ancestor, right? And from this ancestor, there was a wolves that came. There was the dog ancestor, whatever. And then from here, there is a dog. This is what the evolutionary line would look like.
Oh, so I thought dogs evolved from wolves though.
No. If
Oh.
this is an ancestor, that ancestor will not be alive in the present date if it has already evolved into something. And that is why when people say, oh, man evolved from monkeys, that is 100% incorrect. Man could not have evolved from monkeys. Why? Because then monkeys will not be here. If monkeys became man, human being, then monkeys would be extinct. We evolved from a common ancestor. That is the correct way. As a biologist, you should correct people when you hear these things. There was a common ancestor during some time where monkeys came, and from here we had another ancestor number 2, and ancestor number 3, and so on, and finally it's human beings. We did not evolve from monkeys, we evolved from a common ancestor. Right?
Makes sense.
Dogs and wolves mate though.
Dogs, sometimes, yeah, there have been attempts to mate them. There might be variation in the results. I don't know if they have produced fertile offsprings or not.
I believe they're fertile because I've seen people who've bred them before.
Yeah.
It's,
Like wild wolf?
Yeah, like a wild wolf.
Could be,
with a dog.
depending upon the chromosome. Now it depends on if the descendant is fertile or not. I don't know about that. I have to check.
Okay.
So, do human activities facilitate speciation? We all know the answer to this. Of course, yes. Here is an example. They conducted tests to determine how one new species formed, and this new species actually formed in nature, and then human beings tried to emulate it. Scientists tried to copy it in the lab to show how this particular new species formed, and they supported the hypothesis that this particular species, Tragopogon myrus, originated by polyploid speciation. And this is what their experiment was. Here, they hypothesized that this particular species formed by polyploid speciation. So these are the two different species of plants, okay? This one, which is 2n equals 12, this one also had 2n equals 12. But you look at the scientific name is different. The genus is the same. And when you see a genus is same, that means they are kind of closely related, but they're still different species, okay? So they took these two and then they pollinated. You took pollen from one and put it into the ovary, the female part of another. They collected and then grew the seeds that were obtained. The seeds were then treated with particular chemical called colchicine, which encourages chromosomal doubling. Now they are trying to cause polyploidy, increase the chromosome number in the lab, because they saw this new species in nature. And they were like, really? This happened in nature? Did it really happen? Let me try to copy it and make it work in the lab. So they use this to encourage chromosome doubling, and this is their result. You see, the polyploid plants resulting from the hybridization of these two species, they were consistent with the new species that they found in nature. So in nature also this has happened, and when they tried to copy it in the lab, they could do it. So when they caused polyploidy, so they proved that polyploidy is the result. Polyploidy caused the result of this new species T. myrus, which was formed by interspecific mating of two different species of these plants. Now islands, most important or most valuable examples are provided in islands, small islands, because what happens in islands is whatever happened due to the water all around, it gets isolated. So you don't see similar things happening in other parts, in other big areas. So let's say life is starting. Let's take the example of Hawaiian Islands or Galapagos Islands. So imagine the starting, okay? Let's say there was no life form on that island. Then what happened? Ocean, which is the source of primitive life, ocean or wind, everything, they might bring the first seed. They might bring the first starting of life, some kind of water plant, the seed gets into land, and by chance that water plant can also start growing in land. So though that first life on a land is called the colonist. Okay, so the colonist arrives. Now, as the colonist starts living on this new island, they are subject to new kind of environmental conditions. So as they are subject to new kind of environmental conditions, the mutations, the random mutations that are occurring, they are now, in order to adapt to that island, nature is going to select a completely different set of mutations. So these populations start diverging from their parent population, because the parent population is, let's say, still in the ocean. So when the parent population is still in ocean, nature is going to select different mutations. But here different mutations are needed. So islands that have physically diverse habitats and that are far enough to permit populations to evolve in isolation, but close enough to allow occasional dispersals to occur, are often the sites of multiple speciation events. And that's why Darwin was so lucky, so fortunate, just like Mendel was also fortunate in some ways. Darwin was very fortunate that he got to study species in Galapagos Islands. Because when he went to Galapagos Islands, he saw, one of the classic examples is different kind of finches, those are birds. So he saw these birds which looked so similar, and that's why it was going in, are they the same group? Are they the same species? However, there were minor differences, and those minor differences are the beaks. Okay, some had straight, short, very tough beaks, some had long, curved beaks. So then he saw why this difference in the beaks, and that is what kind of ignited his curiosity, and he started recording whatever he saw, all his observations and all the data. And the most important part is he could draw logical conclusions from his observations. That is also very important. Okay, so the distinctive beaks adapted for the specific diets of different species of finches are an example of correlation between structure and function. So you see, these are different types of finches existing on Galapagos Island. This is a cactus seed eater. Just focus on the beak. This is an insect eater. Is the beak the same as this? No, right? This is a tool using insect eater. So even within the insect eater, it could be the beak is being used for another kind, to make the nest or whatever. So depending upon which part of island the finches are mostly concentrated, the kind of food available, so the beak shape changed. Microevolutionary progress. When evolution occurs below the level of species, that's a microevolutionary change. When evolution occurs above the level of species, that is macroevolutionary change. So speciation is often low in contrast to microevolutionary, which may be apparent. The process of speciation, which is macroevolution, here this is slow. So macroevolution, evolutionary change above species level, includes impact of mass extinctions on diversity of life and the origin of key adaptations. One of the mass extinction events that all of us here know is the extinction of dinosaurs. What do you think would have happened, hypothesize, if the dinosaurs had not become extinct? Would the earth have still looked the same as it does now? No. Okay, why? What is one of the main things that would have happened? Not you. Somebody else. Yes, Emma?
I don't think we would, humans would have evolved, and we wouldn't have, at least if we did, we would not look how we do now.
Exactly. We wouldn't have evolved. Why? Sarah? Why do you think if dinosaurs were still alive, if they had not gone extinct, Why is it that humans wouldn't have evolved?
Well, they would be a very huge predator to human beings, so that would be
They would have just eaten up all our ancestors. Our ancestors wouldn't have survived because dinosaurs were big predators. We had carnivores, we had herbivores, and they were on the top of the food chain. They were the ones kind of deciding everything. They were the ones eating. So mammal evolution of mammals wouldn't have occurred if dinosaurs had survived. So even our ancestors wouldn't be here, probably mammals wouldn't be here, and reptiles would have ruled the earth. Dinosaurs, and they would have evolved into much more dangerous, bigger, we don't know, more aggressive, different kinds of dinosaurs. So the earth would have been ruled by reptiles. Mammals would have never appeared because dinosaurs wouldn't have let that happen. So that mass extinction of dinosaurs, for whatever reason, it was because of the extreme cold, because of the snow age or the ice age, or for whatever reason, the scarcity of food, because they were eating up so much, they became extinct. Or what do you call it, that strike? Asteroid strike. So whatever killed them, that changed the future of Earth. That led to the evolution of two main things, mammals and aviation, flying birds. So whatever little dinosaurs that remained, they had feathers, and feathers was initially for insulation. Feathers was not initially for flight. So some of the dinosaur-like organisms that were there, they had feathers. By chance, some of them could just kind of go up to a little height on the tree, so those were sitting there and they saw a prey, a little mouse or a rodent that they could eat. So if they had a height, they had an advantage, they could look at their food and they could kind of jump onto it from a height. So it gave them a survival advantage. They could eat, and as they jumped, dived on their prey more, that led to the first flight. That was the starting of flight. That was the starting of birds, right? So because of that, we got birds, we got mammals, mainly mammals. Now this is geologic time scale, millions, billions of years. So when it's the life cycle of Earth, the life history of Earth, you see here geologic time, okay, and these are different eras: Precambrian, Paleozoic era, Mesozoic era, Cenozoic era, and geologic, and the Cenozoic era is divided into tertiary and quaternary. So this is the time when we had the dinosaurs, Mesozoic. Fossil record, this is the last one for today. Usually we measure the date by this technique called radiometric dating, which is based on the decay of radioactive isotopes. I think we discussed this in one of the early lectures. For example, we use carbon isotopes. Does anybody remember what's an isotope? You have to go back to chapter 3, 4. What is an isotope, Luke?
It's an atom with a different number of
Neutrons.
neutrons.
Yes. So if it is carbon 12, carbon 13, and carbon 14, carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14, right? So what is different in these three carbon atoms? The number of protons stays the same. It's the number of neutrons. So that means if the number of neutrons is changing, what is changing? Is it the atomic number or the atomic mass, Melissa? Good job. So it is the atomic mass that is changing. So we use that, okay? We use these radioactive isotopes to measure to estimate the date of not only geological life, formations, but also human or other animal life. Another commonly used method is to date layers of volcanic rock or ash above and below the sedimentary layer in which fossils are found. So sometimes a fossil may be formed and we do not know exactly how old is this fossil. So instead of trying to find out the age of the fossil, we try to measure the age of the geologic formation, the layer of rock, the layer of sand, because there are geologists also, they have different techniques to measure the age of the rocks and the crust and the soil, and that is how we know, okay, so this particular fossil has become fossilized in this layer, and this layer is, let's say, 2 million years old. That means this particular life form existed 2 million years ago. And we're going to take up the next slides in the next class. So we are done with today's lecture.